Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Yeah, live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com and across the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or trans. Oh my gosh, it just looked at my beard is so poofy today. Hello, good morning. Welcome to the program, hour one of the Michael Dukes Show. Good morning and welcome to the 6 o'clock club. Wow. What a day. What a day. We are ready to go. We're rapidly running into the end of summer. It was so hot last night, and then this morning it was cold. It's like one of those things where it's like, oh, no sheets, no blankets. And then at 2 o'clock this morning, I was like, where's my blanket? Kind of thing. It's that wild swing time. And so welcome to it, and thanks for coming in and joining us. This is the Tuesday edition of the show, and that means today is the day that we're going to get down and get into some details on some things with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. And this morning, we're going to talk about the new credit rating, the new bond rating that Alaska has achieved, and why it's actually being built on the backs of the death of the PFD. Does that make sense? Did that whole statement make sense? Why the death of the PFD is the foundation for the new bond rating. Also, why non-residents should contribute to the budget here in the state of Alaska, and why fiscal hawks, people who would like to see cuts to the university, should still be able to sit on the University of Alaska Board of Regents. And that doesn't seem to be the case right now of what's going on. So it is, it's just another one of those beautiful days. Thank you for coming out and joining us. If you would like to be part of the program and join the mob, is this right? Mob of merry malcontents. That's they're calling themselves in the chat room this morning, the mob of merry malcontents. Good morning, all of you. Happy, that's an oxymoron, isn't it? Happy malcontents. I don't know. I think you could be happy while you're still pushing back against the establishment, but maybe that is an oxymoron. Anyway, you could join us all in the chat room this morning if you'd like to do so. We simulcast the radio show every morning on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. Did I just assume your emotion? I called you Mary. Did I just assume your emotion? Maybe you're sad. I don't know. Anyway, come on out and join us over there on Facebook. We have a good time every morning. Usually 50, 60 people in the chat rooms across the platforms, having a good time and enjoying each other's company, usually. So come on in and be part of that as well this morning. So that's the big thing. In hour two, we're going to talk with Chris Story this morning, who I don't know exactly what he's going to talk about, but he called me yesterday. He was all excited. Last week, I talked about a book that he had never heard about, written by Peter B. Kind, called The Go-Getter, written in 1921. And he was excited because he'd received it, and he was going to read it last night. And so we may have a bit of a book report today, or he may wrap it up into whatever it is that he is teaching or talking about today in hour two. But that will be our betterment session in hour two this morning. Oh, man, a little dry. Got to get a little water here this morning. All right, so what else are we going to talk about? Well, there are some headlines out and about here this morning. Some different things that are interesting to talk about. One, I do probably get into this in hour two. I want to talk a little bit about remote work. and that means remote working. That it's here to stay, and it's a real deal. And I feel I feel the pressure of it, and we're going to talk about that here as well. But the one thing that I want to dive into here this morning before we get into it with Brad Keithley is this. How powerful, how strong a word do I want to use? Sanctimonious, I think, is the word that I want to use. Sanctimonious seems to be a good word. It may be slightly offensive to some people, but I'm going to use that word this morning because there's a lot of sanctimony going on about people especially in Fairbanks. Now, as I've said before, when I served on the Borough Assembly, I fought tooth and nail to try and protect property rights. That was one of my big things. Natalie Howard and I were always trying to strengthen the grandfather rights of people who had property and doing things like that. As an extension of that, as the chair of the RSAC board, which is it's the Area Road Service Commission, where we helped organize the various road service areas around the borough. I tried to keep the borough out of those as well, as much as I could. With the help of a brilliant legal mind in the former borough attorney, Renee Broker, who was very good at trying to keep government small. She was, I'm not a huge fan of attorneys. She is the exception to that rule. She is not just a lovely person, but a brilliant legal mind, and was very, very strong on that. I really appreciated her so much. I really did. Anyway, so this whole thing with the comprehensive plan, we talked about that with Tammy Wilson last week. And now we've seen a reaction to this. And again, I don't know the person who wrote this piece in the Fairbanks Daily News. The name is familiar, but I don't believe I've ever met them. Eric Troyer is the name of the person who says Eric Troyer's lived in Fairbanks since 1989. And served on several boards, including the Interior Trail Preservation Coalition and the Vista Gold Road Service Area Commission. He writes an article here that talks about the new ordinance that's been put forth by Barbara Haney that would remove the trails from part of the comprehensive plan, would remove the ability to basically take people's property, to put it in this comprehensive plan and allow people public access to people's private property. And the tone of this entire article is, it is sanctimonious. It really is. He said, he starts off with saying the proposed ordinance that would gut the Fairbanks Borough comprehensive planning process will have a public hearing tonight at 8 p.m. He said, while there are positive aspects of the ordinance, it would be damaging to the borough. A key part of the ordinance is a single line that would allow property owners to opt out of planning documents for anything that is dedicated for public purposes, such as park, trail, or road. And to me, that is the biggest red flag in this entire article. It would allow the property owner to opt out. Okay, so first of all, it's our property, right? I mean, I own property in the Fairbanks North Star Borough. I don't want a trail going. I pay property taxes on that. I want to be able to do with my property what I want to do. But somehow, in many people's minds, your private property is not so private. It should, in fact, be available for the public good. No matter what you want, it should be available for the public good. Now, people down in Homer should be listening to this and thinking about Zach Brown and that whole thing with his property where he just wanted a little privacy and didn't want but that's okay. It's for the public good. So it must be okay if it's for the public good. And when I say public good, read here a small contingency of people who want to go hiking across other people's property. I mean, that's just one of the things right there. A key part of the ordinance is a single line that would allow property owners to opt out of planning documents for anything that is, quote, dedicated for a public purpose, such as a park, trail, or road. Now, I will note that the government does have the ability to take private property in a process called eminent domain, that when it is of the best, highest use of the public, that then they have the ability. But see, then they have to compensate you for that. It is a taking. What this is proposing and what these overall comprehensive planning documents are doing is they're trying to do a taking without recompense. They're saying, well, yeah, you own the property, but, there's a higher use for this where the public should be able to come in and have access to it, which completely violates the whole idea of private property to begin with. And the idea I understand having kind of a roadmap for where you want to go as a borough or as an organization or as a business, or I understand wanting to have a roadmap. The problem is that in the case of the government, when they have a planning document or a planning process, they basically want to micromanage and plan everything out to the nth degree 20 years from now. They don't want you to do anything on your property because maybe someday, 20 years from now, they may want to do something with your property. Meanwhile, you may have bought and paid for it. You may have completely paid it off. You may own it free and clear, except, of course, you're paying the ransom every month or every year to Uncle Sugar in the form of the borough government to make sure that you could stay there. You think you own your property? Just stop paying property taxes for, 3 years? I don't know. I've been on the list before because I get so agitated about it. I just put it off sometimes. And next thing you know, they get a notice in the mail saying, if you don't stop this, we're going to put you on the list and sell your property. I'm like, I own the property free and clear. Doesn't matter. This article or this opinion piece goes on. And it says other parts of the ordinance would change how affected landowners would be contacted and require the borough to pay for required easements. Although the wording in the ordinance is unclear as to whether payment would just be for trail access, trail easements, or trail or road easements. But let's consider the key opt-out. I'm certain if property owners can opt out at any time or only when a plan is being adopted. I'm uncertain, he says, if it's either any time or only when a plan is being adopted. In any case, the proposed ordinance would turn any comprehensive plan into an uncomprehensive plan. I'm so sorry about that. Boo freaking who. Theoretically, all landowners could opt out, making the planning process useless. Well, yes, if the planning process is violating your private property rights, then I'm all for making it useless. Even if some opt out, the plan would be a patchwork, defeating the concept of a comprehensive plan. How much power do we want to give and of course, this guy's got a pet project. He wants the trails. And so he always wants access to your private property. That's the point here. They want access to the private property without having to pay for it. He goes on down later on into the article. It starts talking about, how much would it cost us if we had to pay for all these things? How would we, how would we pay for all that? It would be very, 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 very expensive. And what about the state and the federal government? He goes on to talk about how this is really not about the small property owners. This comprehensive plan and this ordinance, you shouldn't do it is because it's about the semi-public agencies like the state of Alaska and the federal government and the university and the mental health trust. We need a plan that goes through all those things. This is really not about the small property owners, except the small property owners are the ones that would be hugely affected by this. University is not so much affected if somebody walks across their land. If you only have 2 acres and you don't want a bunch of hooligans running up and down on your property, that's a real problem. I'm sorry. I don't mean to yell. I apologize. I don't mean to be. But this is some hubris. Just on a monumental level. Will you want us to pay for that? No, we couldn't. No. And, maybe we'll talk about this more on the other side. I didn't realize I was getting so close. I got to go. But, just the arrogance of, that's not really your property. We're just letting you live there. And you'll damn well like the fact that we're going to have a trail going across your place, and you should just give it up. But don't stop paying your property taxes. theoretically landowners could opt out. Yes, they should opt out. Okay, I gotta go. The Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio.
We're broadcasting live through a series of tubes.
Allowing all of these entities to provide streaming stuff going on the internet.
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. Sorry. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Got so mad I pushed the wrong button. Got so mad I was pushing the wrong button. Oh, these people, I swear to God. I mean, so sanctimonious. Well, we need all that for the comprehensive plan. We've got to have it because we've got to plan everybody. No, only if you're a narcissistic asshole do you have to do that kind of stuff. We have to plan everybody. No, you don't. People want to do what they want, as long as they're not hurting anybody and they're paying their taxes and they're doing all the things that you want to do. You do not need access to their property. If it's an easement across the edge of the trail for access to something, that's fine. But I mean, this plan, this comprehensive plan, especially when you're talking about things like the walking trail and a long trail and all this other kind of stuff. I mean, it is just astonishing that they're like, well, we need access to that. I mean, he goes into this whole thing about how, what if somebody tries to subdivide and the subdivision needs to be extended across state land to borough land. But if we have no comprehensive plan, he's acting like this whole thing just destroys a comprehensive plan. It doesn't. It screws up their trail plan, overall trail plan, but it wouldn't, the state doesn't have to opt out. The feds don't have to opt out. The university and the mental health trust don't have to opt out. But it does give smaller property owners the ability to opt out because, again, most of those other places, the state, the fed, they don't care about people necessarily walking across their property. But if you've got an acre and a half somewhere and you don't want people wandering through the middle of your yard, which is where some of these trails are platted out, then yeah. And he's offended that they could be, I apologize. I didn't mean to get so agitated by this, but this is just one of those things. Okay, Brad Keithley is in the chat room. Boy, this was not the day for me to start with that story, was it? Absolutely not the day for me to start with that story, because now I got to talk to Brad, and he's going to be all calm and rational. And I don't want to be calm and rational. I want to be angry about this. Hello, good morning, my friend. How are you doing this morning?
Is there a blood pressure monitor on your schedule, on your scale there?
No, not really. I mean, my blood pressure is extremely low, so it's good. I mean,
not this morning, I doubt.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, generally speaking, it's super low. So maybe I reached the normal category at this point for people, because usually my blood pressure is like, 63 over 105 or something. So anyway, hi, Brad.
That's some of the most animated I've seen you on an issue this early in the morning.
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought, well, this would be a good thing to talk about. And I didn't realize how agitated I was going to get the more I talked about it. Because I just cannot believe the hubris of people to say, well, it's your property, but we want to have access to it for the common good or for whatever, for our hobby, trail walking or trail hiking or whatever. And I'm just like, if you guys want that, then pay for it. I pay my property taxes. I want my privacy, or I want to do with my land what I want to do. If you want to have access to my property, you can offer me a fair market sum for it, and I'll decide whether or not I want it. And I may refuse it. That's my right as a property owner. But they come up with these big comprehensive plans where they, we're going to decide, We're going to decide what your place is going to look like in 20 years. Please step back. Sorry. All right. Let's continue ahead. Brad, I told you, not a good day for this. All right, let's get going on the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Brad Keithley is our guest. We're going to dive into it here and get started right now. Please like and share, like and follow. I'm not even caught up with the comments, so I apologize if you've been commenting. But here we go. Let's do it.
The Michael Duke Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
All right, welcome back to the program. It is the Michael Duke Show. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Yeah, I got a little wound up there. I apologize. This is one of my few truly hot-button issues. So we'll come back to this, I'm sure, after we're done with Brad. But Brad Keithley joins us right now. Maybe Brad can soothe the savage beast inside my heart right now. I doubt it, he says. Oh, my Lord.
I think you're pegging at the high end here right now.
Brad's back in the green room just, struggling not to laugh outright at this whole thing because he's watching me just spin like a top. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, comes on every week to talk about three big topics. We call it the weekly top three. So, Brad, let's get started. The latest news, of course, is that there's a new bond rating agency, or newer bond rating agency, that has come out and given Alaska a AA bond rating. Yay! It's so great. What they don't tell you, of course, is that it's built on the funeral pyre of the PFD. If you're looking for some imagery, there you go. The funeral pyre of the PFD, they have built it on top of that. Am I wrong? Go for it, Brad.
You're really into it this morning. You're getting these things going. So in the Alaska Beacon, I haven't seen it picked up anyplace else yet, but in the Alaska Beacon, James Brooks has an article that's titled, "In Alaska's Newest Credit Rating, Analysts See Some Economic Upside." And the first paragraph is a new review by analysts from New York City-based Kroll Bond Rating Agency has delivered Alaska's most positive fiscal checkup in years. The firm, which has not previously examined Alaska, gave the state a AA credit rating in late July, the second highest of the 10 steps in the company's rating scale. And so you read that and you go, wow, that's great. We're being recognized as getting our spending under control. I have to laugh at this, but we're being recognized as getting our spending under control, that our fiscal policy, our fiscal situation is under control. And, to the outside world, it looks like, we're back in control of the situation until you go into the details of the document. And James doesn't pick this up, by the way, in the article. You have to go into the details of the report by Kroll to understand what's going on. And here's what's going on. Basically, they've ignored the PFD. Basically, they're saying Alaska's in great fiscal shape if you don't count that PFD thing. And they explain that by saying this is from the report. Dividend payments reduce the level of resources available for operating purposes, but the legislature's discretion in setting the APF ERA transfer and the level of dividend payments each year provides flexibility with respect to managing the state's finances. And you go back on into the report and look at some of the detailed financial analysis, and what they're doing is like the Alaska Senate, treating the PFD as an expense that can be varied up and down depending upon Alaska's financial situation, depending upon other revenues, and depending upon spending levels. And so they're assuming that the report essentially assumes that the PFD will be varied up and down in order to keep Alaska's fiscal situation stabilized. That's what the report does. That's how we get a AA bond rating. That's why the headline is Alaska's fiscal situation is under control, and that's the basis for the Dunleavy administration's press release that says, "Oh, aren't we good?" We have a AA bond rating now.
This is this. Oh, wait, before you get into it and hold that thought, but this is what got me was that the tone in this article and the tone of the press release and the tone of the quote in it is like the administration is looking for kudos for cutting the dividend. That's really what I mean. When you read the what was the quote, Governor Mike Dunleavy and Department of Revenue Commissioner Adam Crum called the report an upgrade from prior ratings done by the firm, Crum adding that it's a significant achievement and a win for the state. You just cut the PFD by 2/3, and it's a significant achievement and win for the. What happened to standing tall? What happened to standing tall is what I want to know. I'm sorry, Brad.
Nope,
Again.
great segue. Here's the deal with these bond ratings, and I've been through a lot of them over the course of my career. The bond rating is a reflection of what the bond rating agency is being told by the company or by the state or by the governmental entity, whatever it's rating. It's a reflection of what it's being told. It doesn't make up these numbers. It doesn't make up these statements about how the state or the company treats certain revenue items. It doesn't make up the financials that go in the back end of the report that are the detail behind the report. It takes what's provided by the state and uses that then to analyze, to run it through its criteria and analyze whether the entity meets certain rating criteria. And so it's the state that has told the Dunleavy administration, because this is done by the Department of Revenue, it's done by the debt manager. These presentations are made by the debt manager in the Department of Revenue, which used to be Devin Mitchell, who's now the head of the Permanent Fund Corporation, and is now Ryan Williams, reporting to Adam Crum. These presentations are made by the debt manager, and it's the administration's debt manager, the Dunleavy administration's debt manager, that is telling the rating agency the PFD can be used like an accordion. It can be collapsed in order to keep the revenues stable or keep the bottom line stable, or it can be expanded. Don't really talk about it being expanded, but it's the debt manager that's explaining these things and providing the numbers to the bond rating agency. So while the Dunleavy administration, when it comes out with its annual budget, and OMB publishes the annual budget, while the Dunleavy administration in those documents drops the PFD to the bottom line and drops the PFD out of the calculation of expenses and treats it separately, as it should, as a designated revenue source, designated for the permanent fund dividend. While the Dunleavy administration does that when they make the presentation, when OMB makes its presentation to the public at the time that the governor does each budget, back behind the scenes, when the debt manager's flying off to New York City to make these presentations to the bond rating agencies, they're showing the PFD up in the expense items and showing it as an expense of government that can be varied up and down. And they're explaining the PFD. The Dunleavy administration is explaining the PFD to the debt rating agencies as something that can be varied depending upon the fiscal requirements of any given budget cycle. So, I mean, we've got a clear example here of the Dunleavy administration talking out of both sides of its mouth.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of those businesses that are running two sets of books, one for the IRS to see and one for themselves. You know what I mean? That's the thing. They're treating it as one way when they're over here, and when they're coming to the public, they're treating it the other way over here. I'm your hero. I'm defending it. Look, I've kept it out. And over here, they're like, oh no, suckers. We're using it as a slush fund to do whatever. That's what it reminds me of.
It is, Michael. I mean, they've got one set of books they're showing to the public. They got one set of books they're campaigning on. One set of books that they're political books about what they claim they're doing with respect to the permanent fund dividend, and then another set of books entirely that they're using with respect to the bond rating agencies. I'll say this: Dunleavy didn't start this. The Dunleavy administration didn't start this. Devin Mitchell started it during the Walker administration. but the Dunleavy administration hasn't stopped it, and hasn't changed it to reflect the principles, the fiscal principles that he ran on his first time, the fiscal principles he ran on the second time, and the fiscal principles he talks about when he brings the annual budget forward in December.
One more thing to be disappointed about. All right. Number two, we finished a little bit early with number one, unless you got something else to say on it. So let's go on to number two. Why should outsiders, why should non-residents, why should they be involved in state budgets? Why should they have to pay a kick? You're going to tell us what's going on here.
So the article that triggered this is, again, in the Alaska Beacon. It's by Yerith Rosen. The headline is "Workforce Shortages Could Sabotage Anchorage and Alaska Economic Opportunities," report says. And it's the report, they're reporting on the report by Bill Popp at last week's Alaska Anchorage Economic Development Corporation and annual presentation of its 3-year Alaska 3-year outlook. And it's talking about here it is. It's talking about the Anchorage workforce and the Alaska workforce, and raising issues about whether those workforces are adequate to meet the job opportunities, the growing job opportunities that are out there. And there was one piece in this that I just found fascinating, and we'll want to talk about more after the break. But here's the paragraph that I found fascinating. It says, in Anchorage, 1 out of every 4 jobs are held by people who do not live in the city. That includes 12%. So that's 25%, right? That includes 12% of Anchorage job holders who are commuters from elsewhere in Alaska, mostly the outlying Mat-Su borough. And 13% of the Anchorage workforce of job holders who are non-Alaskans traveling here for shift work or seasonal work, or who never come to Alaska at all because they are working remotely from elsewhere. That's a huge number. 13% of the Anchorage workforce. He's not talking about the state workforce. He's talking about the Anchorage workforce, which is, where people live. 13% of the Anchorage workforce is coming from out-of-staters. So we need to talk about what that means. I want to talk about what that means from a fiscal policy standpoint, and what we should be doing with respect to those outsiders.
This is a fascinating topic, in part because part of it touches on something I'm going to touch on later on in the show, which is this remote working thing. But you're right. Even if you're remote working, you have to contribute in some way. It's going to be an interesting discussion. Brad Keithley is our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. We're going to continue with him here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in just a moment. The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. We'll return right after this.
Running on 100% pure beard power. Oh, also some coffee. We dip our beard in coffee.
Ha, nice beard.
The Michael Duke Show.
I always find it ironic. Somebody like Bill Popp, and Bill Popp, by the way, now resigned from AEDC and running for Anchorage mayor. Just another example of shuffling government bureaucrats, because AEDC, although they call it a nonprofit, it's almost completely funded by the city. This is a city funded, just like all the economic development corps around the state are pretty much almost exclusively funded by either the boroughs, the cities, or some kind of federal grant where they're in there. They're doing studies and making money on the Alaska study industry kind of docket for all these different things. And now he's going to go in and make Anchorage great again, or whatever he's going to do. But this is some serious irony here, Brad.
Well, yeah. maybe he's setting his maybe this report was nothing more than setting his the tone of his upcoming campaign, if that's indeed what he does. I mean, that's what the rumors are. I don't think he's announced yet.
No, but I mean, it's in the public. He hasn't made the official announcement, but he's out asking for money. And even after this luncheon, he was telling people that he was running for mayor. So, I mean, it's made the papers and everything else. So he hasn't made the official announcement, but I guarantee you it's coming.
Well, the announcement then his platform is going to be, I'm going to make Anchorage great again. I'm going to bring all these jobs back for Alaskans. I mean, it is true. We're on a rising tide here in terms of jobs in Alaska, and we're on a rising tide in terms of jobs on the North Slope. I mean, if Willow and Pika go forward, there's going to be a tremendous amount of work up on the North Slope and a tremendous amount of kickoff work that goes on in town and in other parts of the state. And he's also true. I mean, one of the consequences, this is nationwide. This is not just Alaska, but one of the consequences of COVID and the early retirements that people took is that the workforce is down. We've lost a significant share of the older part of the workforce due to regular retirements and early retirements, and a lot of that has taken wind out of the sails of having enough people for the rising jobs that are coming out there. So Alaska has always filled that gap between jobs on the one hand and people in the state employed stepping up to those jobs on the other hand. They've always filled them with out-of-staters. This seems to be, to me, a particularly high number as we have the rising tide of jobs and the dropping in the workforce. The gap seems to be growing, and this seems to be a big number of jobs, and this is just in Anchorage. I mean, this is just so this isn't reflecting North Slope jobs at all, which I would guess, if this is what's going on in Anchorage, I would guess we're having the same sort of gap show up on the slope, and we're having the same sort of influx. We're going to be having the same sort of influx of outsiders coming in to fill the jobs on the slope as Pika and Willow gear up.
Yeah. Well, and of course, COVID had a lot of impacts. I've had a lot of discussions about this. Many of my clients in the radio world, advertising clients, are all basically stating the same thing. They don't have enough qualified employees. They don't have enough people who will show up to work. They don't have enough people who want to stay on the job. COVID had some real ramifications. My speculation, and this is a complete and total sidebar from what Brad has been talking about, but I'll get his take on this. My speculation is that COVID and all the fear mongering that went around COVID, the fear porn that you saw coming out of the TV and out of the radio all the time, made people really face their own mortality. And it kind of changed their mindset from keeping up with the Joneses or having the next nice thing to people were afraid, and now they value memories over stuff. They value making memories and doing things and spending time doing the things that they love versus being in a cage for 8 hours a day or 40 or 50 or 60 hours a week. And so I think a lot of them are just basically doing the bare minimum just to get by so they can enjoy experiences and things like that. I think that's been one of the fundamental changes.
That very well could be, Michael. I mean, the numbers that I've seen, and I've seen more numbers at a national level than I have at the state level, to be honest. But the numbers I've seen are showing the early retirements really has been a big driver in the reduction in the workforce. I mean, what happens when you have early retirements is people in the middle bracket, people halfway through their career move up, and then people in the lower, people who are just starting their career move up to what was previously the filled by the middle bracket. And so you don't have that initial workforce, young workforce able to go into service or available to go into service jobs. They've moved up.
Right. No, it's interesting. We'll see what comes of it. Okay, we're going to continue with number 2 here. Brad Keithley is our guest, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets, The Michael Duke Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like and share, like and follow. Here we go. Continuing now with Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. It is the weekly top 3. We were into number 2, talking about it a bit here, which is the out-of-state workforce makes up a big part of Alaska. We were talking about Anchorage. 13% of the overall workforce in Anchorage is out-of-state workers, and whether that means they fly up, they're seasonal, or even remote workers, it's a big problem in a lot of ways. Brad, give me your thoughts on this.
Well, it's a big issue. I mean, it's good to have jobs. It's good to have the jobs in Anchorage. It's good for those jobs to be available. But that's a big chunk of the workforce that's coming from out of state, and they're they put a burden on the state. They drive on roads. They demand government services, or they expect government services while they're here. There is a burden that's put on the state by out of state workforce, and they ought to contribute to the costs of government. In every other state that uses either a sales tax or an income tax as part of the state revenue scheme, non-residents contribute to the costs of state government, and it reduces the burden on in-state on residents when non-residents pay a chunk of the cost of government. They expand the cost of government a little bit, but they pay a share of the cost of government when the state either has a sales tax or an income tax. In Alaska, we don't do that. In Alaska, all of the burden at a personal level is being put on middle and lower income Alaska families by using PFD cuts. All of the burden is on Alaska residents. Non-residents at the state level, non-residents aren't contributing to the cost of government, and that's a big percentage. 13% of the workforce in Anchorage is coming from out of state. When ICER did the 2016 study, they estimated, based upon the numbers then, that 7 to 15% of the cost of state government could be, depending upon which revenue source you use, whether you use sales taxes or income taxes, a flat rate income tax or a progressive rate income tax, that 7 to 15% of the costs of state government could be borne by non-residents. And that reduces, keep in mind, the share of government that then has to be paid for by the remaining Alaskans. Put another way, Alaskans using the PFD only, Alaskans are paying 7 to 15% more than they otherwise would if we had non-residents contributing a share of the cost of government. So when you have, if that number were only 2% or 3%, maybe you would say, oh, it's too small to mess with. It's too small to worry about. Let's not gear fiscal policy around trying to go after those dollars. But when you've got 13% of the largest city in the state's workforce, half the state's population, when you've got 13% coming from out of state, that's something you think about. I mean, how are you going to get them to contribute a proportionate share of the cost of government? One other factor that always really gets me going on this issue. These people are paying, if they come from income tax states or sales tax states, these people are paying taxes to their local state government. If they're coming from income tax states, they're paying tax in that state, in their state of residence. They're paying tax on the income they're earning in Alaska. But that revenue is going to help the state that they come from. Oklahoma. I have friends in Oklahoma who come up and work in Alaska. They pay Oklahoma state income tax on the income they get in Alaska. That goes to help the state of Oklahoma. If we taxed it in Alaska at whatever rate we set, if we taxed it and tax the Alaska share of their income in Alaska, it would go to benefit Alaska, where they've earned that income, and it would be deducted from their tax obligation in Oklahoma. They wouldn't pay tax twice. There'd be an allocation between the two. But Oklahoma is saying, hey, if Alaska isn't going to tax it, great for us. We'll tax it, and we'll take that additional revenue in and help reduce the burden on Oklahoma residents by getting Alaska essentially to contribute a part of it. So this is a screwed up fiscal situation we've gotten ourselves into, and it's the consequence of doing whatever we can to avoid taxing the top 20%, right? By pushing the burden to middle and lower income Alaska families through using PFD cuts, and the non-residents, 13% of the Anchorage workforce, the non-residents are getting a free ride as a result of that policy. It's wrong. It's bad. It's putting an undue burden on Alaska residents that shouldn't be there.
And they're not necessarily getting a free ride because a lot of them are paying taxes in their home state, so they're still paying it. And why would they care whether it goes to Oklahoma or goes to Alaska if it's essentially the same one way or the other? It doesn't, I don't think it would matter necessarily to them. And it's a significant chunk. In fact, I think if I remember correctly, you one time actually ran the numbers on how much money is lost through that. And if I recall correctly, it was $200 or $300 million. Am I remembering that correctly?
No, that's using the old ICER numbers of 7 to 15%, the 2016 study numbers of 7 to 15%. Hammond used a figure of 25%, and we may be getting back to the days of 25%. When you look at the slope, so what happens when we have activity on the slope, construction activity on the slope, is we import a lot of workers because those workers have sort of dissipated. They've gone into the economy. They've left the state. They've done something elsewhere in the economy. They've done something when slope activity comes down. So when slope activity ramps back up, we typically have met that gap by bringing in out-of-state workers. So the 13, I'm going to guess that the 13% that Pop's talking about in the Anchorage workforce is sort of the low end of what we're seeing statewide when you count in the activity on the slope. And using the ICER numbers from 2016 may be understating the amount of revenue that we're missing, the amount of overburden that we're putting on Alaska residents because we're not getting a contribution from non-residents.
So would you would you suggest just a non-resident tax, or would you suggest a tax that would, or would you suggest a tax that would have an exemption for in-state residents? I mean, what do you think?
So Matt Berman from ICER came up with an excellent analysis of how to deal with this situation in a piece he did for the ADN earlier this year. And basically what he does is convert the PFD into an income tax credit, and says if you can use your PFD as an income tax credit. So if you have an income tax obligation of, just to pick numbers to make sense, $100, and you have a PFD of $50, then you can use the PFD as a credit against your income tax, your income tax obligation. And the break point is somewhere around $250,000. Those below $250,000, if you use a flat tax, those below $250,000 wouldn't pay an income tax at all. Those above would contribute something of an income tax, and it would have the effect then of, since non-residents don't have a PFD, it would have the effect then of putting the tax burden, a bigger share, frankly, of the tax burden over on non-residents.
All right, let's move on to number 3. Why can't fiscal hawks be part of the University Board of Regents? We just saw Tuckerman Babcock after 2 months throw in the towel because he said it takes too much of his time. I don't know if there's a code in there or something for it, but it looks like whatever's happening, they do not want anybody who's looking for efficiencies or any kind of cuts to the university to be part of the Board of Regents, Brad.
Yeah, Tuckerman's the second one who Dunleavy's appointed, who is going through this situation, and it's concerning. Bethany Markham was the first. Bethany Markham was named by the Dunleavy to the board. She was not confirmed by the legislature, and now Tuckerman, who was appointed by Dunleavy to the board, is just backing out before he goes into the confirmation process. And this is from the Alaska Beacon's article on Tuckerman's discussing Tuckerman's decision. It says some legislators say they thought Babcock's confirmation would be unlikely. He was a supporter of Dunleavy's deep cuts to the university budget in 2019, among the reasons legislators cited when they rejected Bethany Markham for the same role. That's bothersome. Now, Bethany had other baggage. Tuckerman has other baggage, and I can sort of understand legislators having issues with both of them for other reasons. And maybe the opposition to the support for Dunleavy spending cuts at the university is just sort of a cover story for these other reasons that legislators voted against them. But to the extent legislators are saying, we're not going to support you for the appointment to the board because you supported budget cuts to the university back earlier in the Dunleavy administration, that's a bad idea. Basically they're saying the only people we're going to support to go on the university board or university cheerleaders, people who want to see all that spending stay at the university, people who are not looking for cuts, people who are not looking for efficiencies, people who are not asking hard questions about university spending. We don't want those people on the board. We want only university cheerleaders on the board, and that would be a very bad result, because the board is sort of the first line of defense in terms of keeping costs down at the university. They're the ones that have the closest feel for what the university is spending. And if we're saying we only want cheerleaders on that board, then we're basically saying we're going to give the university just free reign, do whatever the heck they want, spend whatever the heck they want.
It's a blank check instead of a watchdog, which is what part of the job of the regents is supposed to be, a watchdog on the university to make sure that they're being ethical and efficient and everything else with the public monies. And if all they're going to get is people who are hype, rah, rah, all you're going to get is more and more and more to the university. Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad, thank you so much for coming on board and joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
Michael, thanks for having me.
We love having you on. All right, folks, we're up against the break. We got more coming up. Don't go anywhere. The Michael Duke Show continues. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. Hour 2, dead ahead. Brian says, ethical universities? Ha, 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 ha. There's an argument there for that, but that's part of what the regents are supposed to do, right? They're supposed to make sure that everything is run. And they've become bastions of bigger, stronger government. As long as they get their kick, it doesn't matter what else is going on, Brad.
Yeah, exactly right, Michael. And it's you want to appoint people who are solid fiscal conservatives. You at least as a part of the board, you want to appoint people who are solid fiscal conservatives, who are looking at the bottom line, who are looking at spending, who are looking at efficiencies, who are looking at ways to run the university more efficiently, lower cost. You want, or at least not bigger cost. You want people as part of the mix in there as part of the mix. And if we're now saying, oh, if you supported budget cuts to the university, we're never going to put you on the university board, then we've taken out a lot of people, and I would guess most of the fiscal conservatives from consideration for the board. The board is not supposed to be a cheerleader. The board is supposed to be an oversight, the closest oversight that you can have, outside oversight that you can have of the university. The legislature is several steps removed from being able to peer into the university, having the day-to-day contact, seeing the monthly reports or the periodic reports. The legislature is several steps removed from the university. And frankly, maybe this is part of how we got into the problem with the university in the first place. We didn't have a board that was exercising strong oversight of the universities, of the spending side and the efficiency side of what the university was doing. So it is troubling. As I say, there was other baggage that Bethany brought in terms of her service on the redistricting board. There's other baggage that Tuckerman brings in terms of his involvement in the so-called loyalty oath issue early in the Dunleavy administration, and maybe the spending thing or the support for spending cuts is just a cover for voting against them for those other reasons. But the governor should be very clear about this. I'm going to appoint fiscal conservatives. I'm going to appoint people who are looking at the university from the standpoint of increasing efficiencies, lowering spending where it's appropriate to do so. And the legislature should not be saying, oh, no, we're not going to. The legislature should not push back and say, oh, no, we're not going to put those people on the board. We only want cheerleaders on the board and build it bigger, bigger, bigger. Because that's a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for going right back into the situation that we had that led the governor to push for big spending cuts to the university in the first place.
And it's sucking up so much of the oxygen in the room and consuming just such a tremendous amount of overhead in the state. And we're seeing across the country right now, we're seeing a pushback against universities in total for many reasons, but fiscal reasons are definitely one of them. And as you've pointed out in the past, Alaska spends more than any of her counterparts in the Western states by an order of magnitude on the universities. And I don't think it's sustainable in the long run.
I don't think it's sustainable either, Michael. And the fact is we still have 3 separate universities. We still have, 2 basketball teams. We still have a lot of things that we duplicate in this state that, frankly, if you look at the fiscals, aren't justified. So we need people on that board that are pushing back. Now, maybe we need cheerleaders on the board too, but by gosh, we don't need all the board to be a cheerleader. We need people who are pushing back and at least can identify where those efficiencies are and at least help legislators who are interested in finding those efficiencies and finding those spending cuts, at least are positioned to be able to help the legislators and the administration do that. If we don't have those sorts of people on the board, at least part of the board, then we're just, we're gonna rebuild this behemoth again and run ourselves into another issue down the road.
Well, and going back to your workforce discussion earlier on, that's part of the problem. Why we're importing is because we're not teaching to what Alaska has to offer, right? We're having to import all these jobs and everything else. Shouldn't the university be focusing on those things so we don't have to import other people?
Yeah. So So that's really a separate issue about what should the university be teaching. And Governor Dunleavy's most recent before Tuckerman, the appointment before Tuckerman, said that he was going to focus on jobs, that he was going to focus on creating his role in the board was going to be focusing on getting the university to teach to jobs. And that's a good, you want that mix on the board as well, but that doesn't necessarily lead you to the most efficient or the most cost effective answer. It teaches you, it leads you to, we're going to focus on jobs. We're going to have a major emphasis on teaching to jobs, but it doesn't. You don't necessarily sit there and go, and we're going to do it in the most cost effective manner. You need people on the board who sit there and go, whatever the heck we're doing, we need to do it in the most cost effective, most efficient manner possible. And that's the kind of criteria that at least that paragraph suggests legislators are using as a tool to vote against people who come in and say we're going to be efficient and we're going to do it in the most cost effective and efficient manner.
Brad Keithley, Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. Brad, thank you so much for coming on board. As always, a pleasure to speak with you. Again,
Michael, as always, thanks for having me.
I apologize for all the angst coming into the show. Thank you so much for being part of it today. I appreciate it. All right, folks, that means hour 2 is dead ahead. Maybe we'll get into this issue of private property rights some more. See if I can spike my blood pressure. Back with more right after this.
Whoa, buddy. Put that thing back in its holster. We haven't gone anywhere.
I don't understand.
Check out the MichaelDukesShow.com for information on how to get access to the podcast.
Welcome to the party, pal.
The Michael Dukes Show.
The greed and the entitlement is astounding to me.
What more could you want from a low-budget radio program?
This is a dumpster fire.
That was just BS.
It is time to get a new perspective.
We know just what you need, and we've got just the cure. Open wide and prepare for a steaming hot cup of freedom.
I just don't fathom it.
The Michael Dukes Show, streaming live across the world.
Live around the world on the internet at michaeldukeshow.com, where you'll find links to the audio-only stream, the podcasts, and, of course, social media sites where we simulcast the radio show each and every morning here on the big show. And, of course, live around the state of Alaska on this, your favorite radio station, and or FM translator. Good morning, my friends. Welcome to hour 2 of this beautiful Tuesday. We just finished up with Brad Keithley from Alaskans for Sustainable Budgets. He came in with us to share and to talk about some things which I think are very, very important. If you missed it, you can go back and watch it on the replay on YouTube or Facebook, or you can listen to it on the podcast, which is available wherever you find great podcasts, including my favorite, Spotify. It's my favorite place to go for. And now they're doing audiobooks too on Spotify, which is pretty darn cool when it's all said and done. So thank you for them. And thank you to you guys for listening to the podcast. 347,000 downloads of the podcast in the last 12 months, something like that. So thank you. Lots of people listening, and we appreciate that for sure. Absolutely. I usually take this time to rehash a few of the things that Brad talked about, but since I was talking about it beforehand and I got a little wound up, I'm going to try and remain as calm as possible here as we continue to go through. But this discussion that's going to be happening tonight in Fairbanks at the Borough Assembly meeting, I hope I can encourage some of you folks in Fairbanks to take a little time out of your busy schedule to go over and testify about this ordinance in front of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission's meeting tonight, and they're going to be talking about this new ordinance that's been put forward by Barbara Haney that talks about the right of private property owners. It is it's an ordinance that would remove from the comprehensive plan the ability for the borough to come into private property and demand that they be able to have, that the public be able to have access to parts of your land for parks, trails, roads, those kind of things. Now, in some people's minds, that is the ultimate of heresy, because to them, all property is public property. You may be borrowing it. You may be paying property taxes on it. You may have your house on it, but really it's there for everybody's use. It is the highest and best use of the land that the public gets access to everything. I'm talking about an opinion piece that appeared in the Fairbanks Daily News Miner from Sunday, written by a gentleman named Eric Troyer, who I don't know. The name is kind of familiar, but I don't think I've ever met him or know him. He said, according to the byline here, he's lived in Fairbanks since 1989 and has served on several boards, including the Interior Trails Preservation Coalition, and he's been a road service area commissioner as well. But to me, that speaks volumes right there, as serving as a board member for the Interior Trails Preservation Coalition. It's not surprising that he's taken this tact in this article, basically saying what a absolute crime that this is, that this ordinance would come forward because it just guts the whole idea of a comprehensive plan. Now, let me just say this. I think that the idea that somehow some committee, whether it's bureaucrats or politicians or really just plain old ordinary folk, that some committee can somehow, some way decide what the borough is going to look like in 20 years from today, can somehow prognosticate what's going to be good on this stuff down the road, is the height of hubris, right? It is arrogance in total when you see things like this. Eric's problem with this whole ordinance, and he lines it out pretty early on in the article, he said there are positive aspects of the ordinance, but overall it would be damaging to the borough. A key part of the ordinance is a single line that would allow, this is the thing, it would allow property owners to opt out of planning documents for anything that is to be, quote, dedicated for public purposes, such as a park, trail, or road. To which I say, yes, private property owners should have the ability to opt out of things dedicated, like parks, a park on your property. What if you own 40 acres somewhere that's got a nice piece that runs up next to a road somewhere, and they're like, oh, we've decided that this would be such a nice park, and we're just going to take it from you. We're just going to take it from you. Or worse yet, we're just going to put a park there, and you still own it, but it's a park, and now you have to do it. Or a trail that runs through your property, or a road. Now, there are road easements that you acknowledge when you get a piece of property or you deed a piece of property. There are road easements in some of these pieces. We understand that. That's part of the understanding. But the idea that somehow this comprehensive plan that is going to plan out all of our lives down the road. Now, remember, this is the same batch of people that at one point when I was on the borough assembly was putting forward a plan that would basically remove all parking from downtown and wanted to put people up. One of the plans was to create a multi-story dwelling, like a skyscraper in downtown Fairbanks, where they wanted everybody to live in the one area and everybody to walk everywhere and do all this kind of stuff. I mean, there is an ideology that is baked into a lot of this planning for cities and boroughs and comprehensive plans that is just, I think, antithetical to the spirit of who Alaskans are. I fundamentally believe that at the base of my core. This guy is going on and on about how this would just wreck things for people, that, oh, it wouldn't be good, that somehow your private property, not allowing the government to basically come in and take your private property without compensation, without any fervor or anything else, that would be just that would be the height of horribleness for that to happen. He goes on to say other parts of the ordinance would change how affected landowners would be contacted and would require the borough to pay for easements. So, like, that's a bad thing. Like, if you're going to have a taking on your property, that the borough would be required to compensate you for that taking. Gasp that would happen. But he goes back again to the key part of the ordinance, the part where it says that all property owners could opt out of planning documents. He says, I'm uncertain if property owners can opt out at any time or only when a new plan is adopted. Either way. I mean, if it was me and I still own property in the borough, and I would, if this plan went into effect, I would immediately say, yes, I'd like to opt out of any comprehensive plan. Not that my property is in danger of being part of it that I'm aware of, but yeah, I would do that because it's my damn property. It's not yours. You don't pay the property taxes on it. Your kids didn't skin their knees in your yard. You didn't have your goats and your chickens running around doing things. You don't have family memories and fun times and hard times and everything else there on your property that you've paid for with blood, sweat, and tears. So yeah, I would opt out. Anyway, he says, The proposed ordinance would turn any comprehensive plan into an uncomprehensive plan. Theoretically, all landowners could opt out, making the planning process useless. Even if some opt in, the plan would be a patchwork, defeating the concept of a comprehensive plan. Wait, what? You mean not everybody wants to go along with your kumbaya, communal, kind of centralized planning, socialist centralized planning vision? I don't usually like to throw the word socialism or communism out there, but this smacks very much of Soviet central planning. This idea that, because you don't want to participate, it's going to basically blow the whole plan. And what we need government to come down with its jackbooted force and basically make you do all these things with your property that you don't want to do for the public good, because it's a comprehensive plan. The ordinance has been submitted again by Assemblywoman Barbara Haney. He goes on to say, I'm sure she's just trying to respond to concerns of property owners who feel they shouldn't be told what to do with their property or feel that they haven't been properly contacted. I appreciate it, but her solution does far too much damage. Well, does far too much damage by protecting property. Again, my one thing that I can stand on for all the time that I spent in the assembly, which is like 5 or 6 years that I spent in the assembly, I feel like my fight for property rights is probably my greatest victory in that time. Because again, government always wants to tell you, bureaucrats and politicians always want to tell you what you can do with your property. He goes on to talk about how the problem with this is that her ordinance would affect all property owners in the borough. The largest landholders are public or semi-public agencies like the state of Alaska, the federal government, the University of Alaska, and the Mental Health Trust. And he goes on to say about how maybe he's intimating basically that they would be opting out, again, do you think the state's really going to opt out of this? Do you really think the feds or the university or the mental health, do you really think if they care if somebody walks across a portion of their land that they haven't used in 100 years and probably won't use for the next 100 years? Do you think that they really care about that? This is about protecting small private property owners. That's what this is about. But see, he sidelines that whole argument by saying, well, and then he paints this big picture about a subdivision with state roads and the university and how it's this big convoluted thing because the state will definitely opt out if that's the case. No, I mean, this is about small private property owners. And he was kind of just gassed about, I mean, how do we pay for this? How do we, He says one aspect would require that the borough pay for dedicated easements required by the comprehensive plan. According to the planning department, people have not complained about not getting paid for easements. Should we start spending borough funds on something that's not been a problem? Is that fiscally responsible? Well, most people probably haven't squawked about getting paid because they didn't know that they could, because it's not been an option yet, right? So he's putting the cart before the horse here. But the bottom line is that you should receive fair recompense for your property. Easements, generally speaking, you usually get paid in some way or another. Or if there's a taking, you at least get fair market value for what, or close to fair market value for what that taking is in eminent domain cases and things like that. This is just, again, this is a showcase of entitlement. This entire article is a showcase in entitlement where he feels he has some kind of perverse right or attachment to your property because he wants to have a trail that goes through it. And he's aghast that you would say no. So if you want to have a say in this, you need to show up to the Planning Commission meeting tonight at the Fairbanks North Star Borough. You need to show up, and under the public testimony, you should say, I'm a private property owner, and I want to have the right to refuse some public trail to go across my property just because you guys have it in the comprehensive plan. I want to have a choice. And if you're going to take it, I want to at least get paid for it. one way or the other. Somebody in the chat room brought up the idea of liability and things like that. What if you got a property that goes a trail that goes across your property, and somebody stumbles and falls and breaks a leg and decides to sue you because it's on your property? Where's the liability in that? What does this open you up to? I mean, there's so many questions here, but the basic line is this: it's my property. I pay the property taxes on it. As long as I'm not hurting anybody else, I should be able to do whatever I want on that property. And if the government wants to come in and have a taking, then I should be fairly compensated for that. Well, most importantly, I should have the ability to opt out. So I hope you're in the Fairbanks North Star Borough and you're up in Fairbanks, that you take the time tonight to go to the planning meeting and have your say. It's probably at 5 p.m. if I'm not mistaken, but we'll see. We'll see if Barbara tells me exactly what time it is. Okay. We'll be going on here. The Michael Duke Show. Chris Story's up next with a message for the masses. 6 p.m. on that planning meeting tonight at the Borough. 6 p.m. Back with more after this.
What is that?
Common sense. Regularly heard on American radio. Michael Duke Show. Radio.
Okay. Pretty sure this violates the section of the Fifth Amendment for if there's no compensation, need to check. Yeah, exactly. Going back up here. Fairbanks has gone full socialist, said Jeannie. Yeah. No, I mean, this is what it sounds like. I mean, this kind of entitlement in this piece, this article, this kind of entitlement, I mean, how can it not be, full socialism? I don't usually throw that word around. I know a lot of people do. If somebody's on the left, they must be a communist. I don't normally throw that thing around, but when you watch these presentations for these planning commissions and these comprehensive plans and everything else, when you get these city planners in there and stuff like that, they very much looks like very reminiscent of Soviet planning, of Soviet centralized planning. That's exactly what it looks like in there for sure. All right, let's get Chris Story, see if we can get him on the phone here and get things squared away this morning on the broadcast. Look at that. There we go.
Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, my friend. How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm on top of the world.
On top of the world. You're a realtor. What are your thoughts on, I mean, I don't know if you've probably not been listening to the program, but what are your thoughts on the easements and all the other stuff that we're seeing? I mean, in Fairbanks, they're wanting to do these comprehensive trail plans where they basically take the property from people with no compensation, and then are puzzled as to why you might be upset about it in the long run. And now they're talking, this ordinance goes forward and basically says, if you're going to do it, you got to pay them. And if not, they have the ability to opt out. What are your thoughts on that as a realtor?
Well, as a realtor, I've spent better part of, just over 20 years defending people's private property rights. And the Fifth Amendment is very clear. There's no mistaking what a taking is. It's been constitutionally, and the Supreme Court has upheld that over and over again, time and again. You cannot take property without just compensation. And yet we see it every day. We see it constantly. And when you bring in outside experts, for example, Homer is just getting ready to revisit its comp plan.
Right.
And we're going to spend roughly $700,000, of which we presumably have confiscated from the wonderful citizens here, and throw it away on a consultant from out of town. Now, these consultants go to workshops all over the country. They're influenced by many, many trends and whatever's, the Urban League and all the people are telling them that is good and this is what we should be doing. And that will find its way through into ordinances, as you were suggesting here, that, really the people of the community ought to create their own comprehensive plan. About 14 years ago, I was on the comp plan review here in Homer, and they brought in, again, an expert out-of-town person with a briefcase, because that's what we need, because we're too stupid to determine our own fate and outcome, and trail systems and footpaths, and we can't figure that out for ourselves. And I sat through a few meetings, and I was like, man, I can't do it. Please don't put my name on this document. I want nothing to do with this. I'm out. And that was a shame, and that I shouldn't have done that. I should have stuck it out and gutted it out and just tried to make the difference there. But it was pretty obvious what was happening. We were rubes being steered by an out-of-town expert with a briefcase, and we were there just said, look, we involve the community.
Yeah, no, I mean, this is not just a Fairbanks issue. I mean, you guys had your own issue down there. Zach Brown had a problem with a trail that was trying to go through his property. And of course, with his notoriety, it just led an extra edge of problems to it. And he couldn't even get that stopped. I mean, this is not just a Fairbanks problem.
That was different. That was pre-existing. That was section line easement. But nevertheless, your point stands.
Yeah, I mean, it's still a problem. And I agree. But this whole issue is definitely frustrating. All right, we'll put that aside for the moment. Maybe we should have Chris back on for a whole private property rights discussion here one of these days. Meanwhile, he's got a message for the masses. Let's get into that here and talk with him about it. The Michael Dukes Show, common sense, liberty-based, free thinking radio. Like and share, like and follow, do all the stuff on YouTube and everything else. Here we go.
The Michael Dukes Show. Not your daddy. Wait, sorry. Not your daddy? Ooh, not your daddy's talk radio. Whew. I was scared for a second. Thought we were going down. Here's Michael Dukes and the show.
Yep. Michael Dukes in the show. That's me, the Michael Dukes Show. Welcome to it. We're continuing hour 2. We bring on our sage of wisdom, our guru of positivity, the Baron of Betterment. He is Chris Story. I was trying to think of something else that rhymed. The Baron of Betterment, the guru of positivity, the Prince of PMA. It is Chris Story. Hello, my friend. How are you?
I love it all. That's wonderful. The Baron of, what was it? Benevolence? No, the Baron
Betterment. Betterment.
Betterment. That's it. I love it. Okay. And what's ironic is that the book called The Go-Giver, I have become friends with John David Mann, the co-author of that book, and interviewed him many times. And he's pre-read some of my manuscripts, and he's an amazing guy. And I just assumed that it was a riff on the concept of, or the statement that people say, oh, he's a real go-getter. And the concept of the go-giver is that, in other words, you give more than you take, and you'll end up getting more than you've given. It's sort of a riff on the notion we all know about the go-getter.
Right.
But where did that even come from, the idea of a go-getter? Well, it came from this guy. And Michael Dukes, you turned me on to the book.
Whoa.
And
Whoa.
I have...
No commas in there. No commas in there.
I'm not the grammatic guy. You know that. I'm not the king of grammar. But I loved it. It's such an incredible book, and it's a message to the masses. It literally is a message that written over 100 years ago, just over 100 years ago, 101 years ago. And the message is be like an ant, carry more than your weight, never be deterred, go under, go through, go over, find a way no matter what. It's a timeless little story. It's a parable. It's a little story that didn't need to be written. The guy who wrote it, Peter B. Kine, had written over 110 screenplays, 30 to 35 novels. And he did not need to write this little message. He did not need to leave his fingerprint in the world in this way. He'd already made it. He'd already made a fortune and would go on to make even more money through his other works. But this little tiny book, this little message is something that any and everybody needs to hear. There's no excuses, no alibis accepted. You can do what you want to do. You can become who you want to become. And in fact, that's exactly who you'll become, is who you want to become. And nothing can stop you other than yourself. If you throw in the towel, that's the only thing that can stop you.
The book left a lasting and indelible impression on me in so many ways. It's been quite a few years since I've read it. In fact, you told me yesterday when you got the book, I'm thinking, where's my copy of this book? Because I'm sure it's in a box somewhere in my storage unit with some of my other books that I haven't seen in a few years. And I'm like, maybe I should go dig that out, or maybe I should just, I don't know, maybe I should just buy another copy because it's probably easier than digging through all that stuff. But it did leave, I mean, I remember after reading that, I just was so, it just impressed the idea upon me so much that, that is what you need in your life, that idea of the go-getter. I know it put into words kind of a philosophy that I had been raised with in a certain way, by my parents and my grandparents, kind of that impressed that kind of knowledge on me. But the book put it in such a way, and in, like you said, in a parable form, which I find easy to consume in a lot of things. But it really left a mark on me. And I really thought, and it's such a small read, it's like 63 pages or something. It really made a difference in my attitude in life. And I thought it was a fantastic read.
It's very reminiscent of a little essay that was written in 1899 by Albert Hubbard, and it was called A Message to Garcia. And to the essence of that, and this is not a spoiler such that you wouldn't want to read it if I tell you this, you should still read it. The little essay is found everywhere online. You don't have to buy it. You can just go download it. Basically, to avert a war, a message has to be gotten to this guy called Garcia, who is in the jungles of Cuba. And the one who's tasked with delivering this message doesn't ask, well, why? Doesn't ask, well, how do I get there? Or what if I don't find him? He doesn't ask anything. He literally takes the communique, puts it in his inside pocket, and he goes to deliver the message to Garcia. And it's the same message. It's be the ant, be willing to alter your course, never accept defeat, and never expect that the path is going to be free of obstacles. Of course, there's going to be obstacles. Of course, the rules are going to change and the rug's going to get pulled out from underneath you. The point is, though, to keep moving forward and to keep going until you've done what it is you set your mind to do. Whatever it is that's been handed you to accomplish in this life, do it. I was watching an interview Jerry Seinfeld gave with CBS this morning or Sunday morning, years ago, 7 or 8 years ago, when he had been a number of years successful in his internet series called Comedians Getting Coffee in Cars, or whatever it's called. And he was saying, he reached the pinnacle, right? Jerry Seinfeld had reached the pinnacle of comedians in television. They couldn't do any better than that. Guy's worth about $1 billion. Couldn't have done any better than that. But he had this other idea, and he got rejected by every single network. He got rejected by every single internet network and platform, which he didn't really need, but apparently he wanted the production assistance and all that. So he kept looking and finally found Sony Studios and their online network called Crackle, which I'd never heard of. And they said, okay, we'll do it. We'll take a chance on you. This is a guy who still, after all that success,
take a chance on him. I mean, this guy's a billionaire. We'll take a chance on you. I mean, say like you're nobody.
Yeah. How many times do you have to get rejected even as somebody as well known, worldwide and world famous and wealthy as him, got rejected time and time again, even still, but he kept moving forward, is the ant. And you can find 1,000 stories like that of the 100 million people you've never heard of that move forward and continue on. In this book, I have to tell you, you'll tell me sometimes, oh, Chris, I feel like I need this message from you and you were speaking to me. I needed this more than you could possibly have imagined. I've invested 6 months in a project. I've invested tens of thousands of dollars in a project that I was about to quit. I was about to pull the plug and say, it's not working. We tried. It's just not working. And I needed this message more than you could know. I read it. I finished it yesterday. Tiffany and I were talking, and I said, I feel like this was written for me in 1922. And I'm so grateful you mentioned it to me, because I'm going to push forward. I'm not quitting. You're not getting rid of me. You're not getting to me. I'm going to continue moving forward. I'm going to take the lesson from this book. I'm going to look for the blue vase, and I'm going to get the blue vase. And that's a Easter egg for when you read the story, you'll get it.
Right.
But I'm going to get that vase, period.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the whole thing is, it's just inspiring. It really is. And sometimes I like, there's a couple different books that I have that for several years I kept copies with me. And when I was stuck in traffic or waiting for a client or something like that, I just pull it out and I'd start to read it. As a Man Thinketh was one of them, and the other one was The Go-Getter. Those are because I had small copies of them. They were like little tiny books, and I would just throw them in my back pocket or throw them in my bag or whatever, and I would sit there and read them because they just continued to remind me of why I did the things that I did. And, it was important. And I love that. I think that was a good thing. Is this one that you would definitely recommend to people who are just starting out on the road to self-improvement? What do you say here?
Absolutely. I don't care where you are on the ladder. It does not matter. You could be on rung one at the ground level, or you could be reaching the top of the wall that you've leaned the ladder against, and you need this. And I think maybe look at it another way. Read this short little book, because it's definitely a short story. As you said, 60 some odd pages, could be read in an hour or a couple hours of commitment, no matter what kind of reader you are. And then think about the kind of thumbprint that Peter B. Kine left on the world with this little book. And then ask yourself this: what about you? Is there a story? Is there something you are to do that in 100 years from now we might be talking about? Somebody might be talking about. Somebody could have picked this little book up. Well, just like you did, you recommended it to me. Dave Ramsey actually republished this book under his imprint at Ramsey Company, and he wrote a foreword to it. He loved this book so much. Something like 30 years ago or whatever, a mentor of his had passed away, had a library, personal library, and left him earmarked a number of books to go to Dave Ramsey. And this was one of them. And he had already owned most of the books that this gentleman left him, but they were special because they were his. And then in the bottom of this box is this little book that was an old tattered copy. And he said it made all the difference to him in the world. And this is a guy who not only hit bottom, Dave Ramsey I'm talking about, he kept digging.
Right.
He hit bottom and then the shovel was still in his hands.
Right.
And then he came back, and it made a difference in his life. It can make a difference in anybody's life. But what message are you to hand down? What is it you're here to do? Do you have a message for the masses, but maybe fear of criticism or fear of rejection, or who am I to speak up? Who am I to show up at that meeting and speak my mind? And who am I to take a risk? And I say, you are the one. You're the only one that can take that risk. And rather than spending the rest of your life wondering what could have been, get your message to the masses. It doesn't have to be a book or a story. It could be something that you're maybe supposed to do. And don't ask how, don't make excuses, accept no alibis, least of all from yourself, and just get going and go get it.
The name of the book is The Go-Getter. It's by Peter B. Kine, again, written in 1922, right there at the end of 21. What an amazing book. And again, one of those ones that I think about sometimes. The Go-Getter, As a Man Thinketh, Who Stole My Cheese is another one that's kind of the same kind of, have you ever read that one? Who Stole My Cheese?
Yeah, that's a good one. Who Moved My Cheese? That's a great little book. Spencer Johnson.
Yeah. So again, and to me, maybe I'm showing my brain power here because I'm naming all these very short little books. But to me, they're little quick hits. There's like a little quick hit, an uptake to try and keep my positivity up and things like that. I mean, you could get down into the Laws of Success with Napoleon Hill, which is a monumental volume, or the Orson Swett Martin books or things like that. Those are really deep and heavy, but sometimes you just need a quick hit. You need an Augmandino, Greatest Salesman in the World, or something like that, with a great story, or something like this little pamphlet. Or what was the one you told me about the other day, which I went out and found a copy of on the internet? It Works. The pamphlet. I mean, that thing is like 15 pages long, 12 pages long, but it lays down the whole thing as well. I mean, sometimes it's just those little things. And again, this is a reminder, Chris, of that old saying that basically who you are or who you will become is basically a consolidation of the people you associate and the books you read in the next 5 years. That's who you'll become. And this is the kind of stuff that I want to read.
And I blame Pulp Fiction just a little bit. There was a time in the early part of the 20th century where people were paid by the word, and they would be far more loquacious than necessary simply for the fact that they got paid a penny a word. Or sometimes if you were Earl Stanley Gardner, maybe you'd get up to 3 cents a word in the pulp magazines. But they just fluffed and built up. Of course, why not? The more you write, the more you get paid, or the more words on the page, the more you get paid for each page. So I think so many business books and so many books on almost any topic are too long, and they're just too much. And when you boil down something to its essence, you're left with the gold. You distill it down to almost like an alchemist. You just distill it down to what really matters. And so for me, that's how I like to write. And that's what I love to read as well. Yeah. So I'm really grateful you turned me on to this book.
Speaking of books you've written, you may have some good news for us on your latest book, The Watchmen. I know it's available right now on your website at ilovehomeralaska.com. Is it available on Amazon? And I guess the audiobook is coming out soon. Is that the move here?
Yeah, in fact, your version of my book will be far more popular than my own version. I know that, because The Making a Man and The Backyard Millionaire have been more popular on Audible than anything else. And so it's in review right now. I submitted it on the 31st, so it should be another day or two. So hopefully by this time next week, you and I'll be talking, and The Watchmen will be available on Audible. But right now, yes, ebook and print paperback copies available on Amazon. I've got them in my office too. If somebody would like a signed copy, I'd love to just mail it to you. Just send me your address, and I'll mail you a copy. And but thinking of the books, the little book that I wrote, the first book I wrote called Born to Live, you can literally, and I love it when people tell me this, they say, oh, I read it in one sitting. And that's what it's designed to do. So if I do nothing else, that will be enough for me. That little book means almost everything to me. But yeah, The Watchmen is going to be coming out on Audible. But yeah, by next Tuesday, we'll be available.
Chris Story, the man from Homer. Thank you, my friend. Folks, we got to go. We'll be back with more. The Michael Duke Show continues right after this.
It's the Michael Dukes Show.
Why not take a quick break?
Be right back. Streaming live every weekday morning on Facebook Live and MichaelDukesShow.com.
Chris Story with us right here. I mean, you do write short, concise little ditties. I mean, no matter what it is, it's shorter than anticipated. I mean, The Watchmen is a breakneck. The pace of it is a breakneck kind of thriller. It really happens over. I mean, that whole book happens over a period of 2 days. Day and a half, 2 days.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was going to say that. Yeah, about a day and a half. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is just a breakneck pace, but so full of stuff and just so juicy. That book is so good. Anyway, and I'm not just saying that because I narrated the audio version of it. It was really an enjoyable read, and it was kind of interesting to peer into the darker side of Chris' story.
Well, I got to tell you, you freaked me out because I'm listening. I listened back to it while I was doing some yard work the other day at one of my rental houses, and I was alone, and things were kind of growing up, and I was out back, and I was listening to the pre-production, so it's not available for anybody else, but I get to listen to it early, obviously. And I'm looking over my shoulder, and I'm like, what was that? It's like, oh man, I was like a little freaked out to be working over there alone, listening to this. So thank you for that. And then one other cool story, and I don't think I ever told you this. A realtor friend of mine in Idaho got The Making a Man on Audible, because that's how he reads, and I'm using air quotes. He doesn't, he's unabashed. He's like, I just listen to books. I don't read paper books. I just listen to books. And I said, well, you got to listen to mine then. So he went and downloaded and bought The Making a Man. And he was a couple days after he had finished it, he was at a friend's place, and they were in his shop out behind the house. And there was like a lamp overhead, and it was just sort of they were just sitting there having a drink together and chatting. And his friend said, "You seem a little unnerved. What's going on here?" He goes, "Oh, I'm sorry." He goes, "I just read this book, and just being in this place is kind of freaking me out. It's making me think I'm back in that story." Anyway, so you left an indelible mark in his mind. He probably didn't sleep for a week.
That's good. I mean, the books are definitely, the Man series is definitely fun. I enjoy all of them, don't get me wrong, but when you're in a fictionalized world like that and you can really dig deep on some of the characters, especially in the first book, oh man, that character was so dark and so fun to play with. And the Watchman is also kind of the same vein. So I really enjoyed that as well. Sometimes it's fun to explore your deeper, darker side a little bit and let a little bit of crazy loose in your voice or whatever when you're reading that stuff. It is, it's fun stuff. I enjoy it. And hopefully I can freak a lot of people out. I hope a lot of people get freaked out by listening to that book. It should be fun. But it's available right now. And it's surprising, we were talking about audiobooks. I saw a statistic the other day. Brandon Sanderson, who's a huge science fiction writer, hugely popular, has had the largest Kickstarter in history for books and authors and things like that. He was doing a piece the other day talking about why he hasn't put his latest books on Amazon, on Audible, because Audible has cornered the market and authors don't get paid. I mean, I think you get paid like 25% or 30% of the cost. It's a crazy number. Anyway, so he was talking about the growth of audiobooks. And that something like it has got almost a 40% market share now. And in fact, he mentioned that one of his last books that on pre-sales, 70% of the pre-sales were on audiobooks, not on covers, not on printed material, but on audiobooks. It's a huge, huge market these days.
It is. And what Amazon's done is they're actually, like with all things Amazon, are they lure you in. So for example, if you go wide, what's called publishing wide, then you're right. You do get just something like a paltry 20 or 25%. If you go exclusive with Audible, which is the Amazon product, then you get 60%. So they're luring as many people into the tent as possible with 60% royalty. And then once they own the tent and you're in the tent, then guess what? You don't know what's going to happen. So it's a gamble. It's a risk over time. But that's the way of all things is Amazon. So we got to support the independence.
Well, yeah. And that's what Sanderson did. He actually tried to shop this out to other places, and he eventually settled on, I can't remember the name of the place, but they didn't really specialize in audiobooks, but they said that they do it for him and give him 90%. And then he worked out a deal with Spotify as well. Spotify wants to break into that market. So it's good to have competition. But I went ahead and got his books on Spotify because why not? I don't want, as much as convenient as Audible is and everything else, I want you guys to get paid. I want you guys as the authors and voice actors to get paid for that kind of stuff. So, but anyway, it's an interesting thing, and we had a good time. I had a good time, and I appreciate you letting me be part of that. Just a small part of it. I appreciate that.
You are it. Well, yeah, and let's talk about real estate another time, anytime.
Yeah, let's talk about private property here. Maybe next time we're on or something. We'll talk about it. Yep. Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it. Chris Story, the man from Homer, right here on the Michael Duke Show. Let's get over to, let me turn that off. Let's get over to this. We got to jump back in. Common sense, liberty-based, free-thinking radio. The Michael Duke Show is right now. Here we go. Okay, welcome back to the program. One final segment of the show here for today, and I appreciate you guys coming on board and joining us and being part of it today, and just kind of enjoying our discussions. Just finished up with Chris Story with our Betterment segment. Kind of our life coaching lessons, and we appreciate that. Went on and on about private property rights. Again, that meeting in Fairbanks, if you're in Fairbanks, you're going to want to be at the Borough Assembly Chambers tonight at 6 p.m. for public comment on that comprehensive plan, because I guarantee you that all the trail people, all the people that want public trails, all the people that think your property is not your property, they're going to be showing up. They're all going to show up. I guarantee it. So if you're a private property advocate and you want to protect your property, I recommend you get over there 6 p.m. tonight. I saw an article today in the ADN that caught my attention, and it struck a chord with me because I've been remote working for a long time. I have been remote working. Obviously, I'm remote working right now. I'm in a studio that I built in my own home for this purpose of doing voice work and doing my show and things like that. But I've been working remotely on and off for probably the last 9 years. And it's freeing, it's gratifying. I find it to be much more efficient for me personally. I'm able to get a lot more done and things like that. And the pandemic, again, that was one of the silver linings of the pandemic, is that that remote work really became an ingrained thing. I mean, it was talked about before, but it was really not practiced. And it was a real exceptional situation usually if somebody got to remote work. But the pandemic changed all that. And there's an article up in the ADN say employers need to realize some workers would rather quit than return to the office. And this is an interesting article. Here are a few quotes from people, from somebody who just recently quit a job in Anchorage. And the reason why they quit, they said, doing time. That's what going into the office to work feels like to me. Like jail, like I'm selling my freedom for a paycheck. The bars closing behind me every morning. And that is an employee. She calls him Jim, who didn't want to necessarily resign, but didn't want to be forced into the office. The employers didn't want to lose him, so they hired Lynn Curry over at the Alaska workplace to take a look at this and to interview him and find out if there's anything they could do to keep him. And she said it took less than 3 minutes to learn why he was leaving. His employer's return to the office mandate had forced him out. His daily commute from Anchorage to Anchorage from the Mat-Su takes an hour and a half a day and more than 2 hours in the winter. Before the pandemic, he made the best of it: books, audiobooks, podcasts, music. Because he enjoyed his work and he liked his managers and did everything else. He didn't really say anything. But after COVID, he was, he simply, loved that. And then trying to come back to work when his employers came back and asked him to work 2 days a week, he took that and said, okay. But then his employers decided, for whatever reason, that it should be all in-person work and that all employees needed to return to the office full time. And he quit. He located somebody who was willing to hire him for remote work, and he turned in his notice. And he said, it's not just the escalating gas prices or even the 8 hours of my life that I waste each week driving. It's the ease I find in working from home, the trust I felt that my employer had in me. I wanted to be able to work in casual clothes with my dogs at my feet, be present when my kids got home from school. I wanted the freedom to work 7 hours one day and 10 hours the next day, as long as I met my obligations. And I think that's a huge thing. It really struck a chord with me because that's how I am. I work from home a couple days a week because it's a 2 hour drive. It's an hour and a half drive for me almost every one way. So it's between 2.5 and 3 hours a day. If I travel into town, it's about 2.5 hours a day that I am spent burned up on the road, which great. I get to listen to audiobooks. I get to do whatever I want. But it also is a complete waste of my time. That's work. When I finish the show and I'm working from home, I go to work at 8:05 in the morning, and I usually don't quit till 6 o'clock at night. That's just because I'm just here. I'm in a groove. I'm going. And it is astonishing to me how more employers are not seeing this and embracing the flexibility of it. If you're a small business owner and you have the ability, now there's certain jobs obviously you can't do remotely. You can't do retail, restaurants. I mean, just certain things you can't do. But if your profession allows for you to work remotely, if your business allows for employees to work remotely, why aren't you embracing that? Why aren't you embracing that with whole? And I'm not saying, if you don't trust your employees to do the job, then obviously you can't trust them to remote work. But that raises other questions about trust anyway, and work ethic in the workplace. But if you can't trust your employees to get the job done, and you'll see by their production and their numbers and what they're doing, then there's obviously some issues there. But if you can trust them, why would you force? And I've seen several articles about this and several pieces and blogs about where people have said they wanted to force me to go back to work. I was doing better than ever before. I was more productive. I was doing this. I was doing that. But they said, because everybody's got to come back to work. Even Elon Musk demanded that all the people that were working, I think at Twitter, that were working remotely, he demanded that they all come back into the office, which again makes no sense to me. Why can't you embrace change? Why can't, especially if it's for the better, if they feel better about it, if they want to do it? Again, I'm more productive when I'm working from home versus wasting time and doing things like that. Is it just to mark a checkbox? Why would you do that? Why would you? So it's interesting to see more and more employers need to understand this. According to one of the surveys, that Lynn quotes in here, she says, according to the career site Monster, September's 2022 survey, 2/3 of employees state that they'll quit if their employers require them to come into the office full time. 2/3, with 40% stating they may quit if required to come into the office even one day a week. According to the consultancy Clarify Capital survey of more than 1,000 remote workers, 7 out of 10 would rather look for a new job than return to the office. 25,000 workers reported that when employees have the opportunity to work flexibly, 87% of them take it. If you see it, why don't you embrace it? Why don't you take that opportunity? And some places have. There's been several firms, lawyers, and things like that where they've cut their real estate holdings, especially in the big cities where it costs a big amount of they've cut their real estate holdings in half. They created shared workspaces instead of dedicated offices and allowed everybody to work from home. That makes sense. That's embracing that idea. Why aren't we doing that more? I don't understand. Anyway, it was an interesting article. You could find it at the ADN. I'll post it up in the comments here today. Good morning, folks. Thanks for coming in. We'll see you tomorrow. The Michael Duke Show, Common Sense Radio. Okay. Michael, do you listen to talk radio in the car? I do. Most conservative talk radio shows, but there's a communist station on the FM band at Fairbanks that I regularly listen to, even though I don't agree with them. I just like to see the flaws in their arguments. I do not listen to talk radio in the car, mostly because talk radio deals with national issues, and I just get angry, and I have no way of affecting it. So usually, I very rarely listen to talk radio at all. And the fact that I'm here in the market, I don't want to necessarily be parroting anybody or copying anybody so I just have a tendency to do my own thing. And that's just how I do. I listen to podcasts. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I regularly monitor my competing radio stations to see what they're doing. That's about it. Anyway, thanks, folks. It is good to see you today. Thanks for being part of it. We will see you tomorrow.
We've shed our terrestrial radio skin, and now we are slimy lizard internet people. It's the Michael Duke Show.